Hello, YouTube. This is Mahadeva the Thunder Wizard, and today I am here to tell you that the Mandela Effect is real. Timelines have shifted, and this means that you can change your past. I just made a video yesterday about changing your past, but I am absolutely, completely, totally flipping my lid. I didn't know what the Mandela Effect was. I had heard about it, and as um, you know, 6 months, a year ago, I really wasn't into conspiracy theory stuff, and people said Mandela Effect, and I said, But I was doing some research today on scientific studies about multiple dimensions and how higher dimensional beings, what it would be like for them to interact with us, so that I could make sense of my recent experiences with extra dimensional light beings. And as it turns out, science is doing a very good job of explaining my very crazy experiences, which I now feel I understand a lot better. As I was doing research today, the Mandela Effect came up, and I said, well, let me check this out. And people started talking about certain things that they remember differently, which seemed to indicate that timelines have shifted. In fact, I was listening to he was a 13-year-old genius talking about how he believed that the Hadron Collider had actually shifted timelines. And they started talking about mirror, mirror on the wall, magic mirror on the wall. And in case you don't know what that reference is, it's a reference to a Disney movie in the 50s where the evil queen looks in the mirror and says, magic mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all? Now, I grew up in the 60s and 70s, and mirror, mirror on the wall, I mean, those sayings were thrown out a lot, but a lot of people don't realize that the Disney movie is not the origin of that story or of that phrase. The story of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs existed long before the Disney movie. And so it didn't surprise me that the Disney movie may have gotten the word wrong. People are conflating the two, easily explained away. And I'm always looking for ways to logically explain things. But there's something that I saw that I'm still flipping out over, because I remember something very specifically happening on a television show every week, every Sunday night. And I remember it very vividly because if you are, if you're considerably younger than I am, you don't know what television meant to us little kids in the 60s and 70s. Back then, we had a television, and assuming my reality is the same as many of yours, we had a television, and I lived in Southern California in Los Angeles County, which would have had more TV stations than others. And I think we had 5 actual TV stations. You had this whole 13 channels and then a bunch of UHF channels. But in terms of like actual television stations with programs you could watch, that were actual like movies or cartoons or things like that, there was only 5. If I remember correct, it was Channel 2, Channel 5, Channel 7, Channel 9, Channel 11, Channel 13. And of those 6 channels, only 3 of them were actual big stations. Like there was CBS, NBC, and ABC. Those were the only big, anyway, again, I'm so freaked out. I could have a completely different reality than you did. In any case, let me just go over the basics, and then I'm going to tell you something, and you can find out if you're from the same timeline as me or not. But my brain is absolutely frying, without a doubt. I mean, it's not even a question anymore. I am from a different timeline. And I think that he's a 13-year-old genius, but he's onto something. I believe that I am from a different timeline. I also believe that the physical and emotional problems that I was having earlier in the month from my interaction with light beings was a direct result of me in meditation once again shifting timelines. I think my body was having a hard time making the shift, or maybe my brain was having a hard time making the shift. I don't know. But let me just for those of you who don't know, let's just do this right. So the term Mandela Effect, I'm reading from a website here, was first coined in 2009 by Fiona Broome when she created a website to detail her observance of the phenomenon. Broome was at a conference talking with other people about how she remembered the tragedy of former South African President Nelson Mandela's death in a South African prison in the 1980s. However, according to this website, Nelson Mandela did not die in the 1980s in a prison. He passed away in 2013. As Broome began to talk to other people about her memories, she learned that she was not alone. Other people remembered seeing news coverage of his death, as well as a speech by his widow. And I'm getting a huge hit as I say that, because that's not just, I think this happened. We have a huge group of people who are remembering news coverage and a speech by somebody's widow having to do with about the death of an extremely popular worldwide political figure. Now, as I sit here now, I can honestly say it feels to me like I have two memories of that. Like I have a memory of that, like just because I wouldn't have been all that interested in it, but I think I remember hearing about him dying in prison. And then I remember, of course, him dying later, and I remember him being alive after that. But that could easily be explained away as me just not really remembering a whole hell of a lot. And that happens with a lot of things. So there's some other Mandela effects here that I want to talk about. Here's one from Star Wars, Luke, I am your father. I remember that. Now, I don't remember like verbatim the exact, but if somebody were to say, Luke, I am your father, I would go, yeah, that's from Star Wars. I remember that. But it says here, if you saw Star Wars Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back, you probably remember Darth Vader uttering the famous line, Luke, I am your father. Website goes on to say, you might be surprised to learn then that the line was actually, no, I am your father. I don't remember it that way, but I'm not so attached to that memory that I'm totally willing to be wrong about that. I've been wrong about all kinds of things in the past, apparently. Here's another one, Mirror, Mirror on the Wall. I talked about that. The Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs story has been around long before the Disney movie. I never watched the Disney movie because those movies, even when I was a little kid, I thought they were cheesy and silly, and I wouldn't watch that. So it doesn't surprise me at all that they again changed the line, and other people conflated, especially in the 1950s, people would have heard mirror, mirror on the wall, because as little kids we said that stuff all the time, especially the farther you go back in time. So they would have just magically superimposed that while they were watching the movie. She would have said magic mirror on the wall, and if you're a 5-year-old kid or a 10-year-old kid, you would have heard her say mirror, mirror. So that doesn't bother me. We'll put that aside as that's just a false memory. Oscar Mayer. I remember the commercial. My baloney has a first name. It's O-S-C-A-R. I remember watching that in the early 70s. And to be honest, I can't remember if it's M-E-Y-E-R or M-A-Y-E-R. But I'm not attached to it. It could go either way. Location of New Zealand. This sounds just really weird. Some people remember New Zealand being in the northeast of Australia and the southeast. In my memory, it's always been in the southeast, so I think that's probably just people not knowing their geography. There's a bunch of others. Here's one, Pikachu. I remember Pikachu I believe Pikachu first came on the scene in the 80s. And I remember watching those cartoons. And I remember Pikachu as having a black tipped tail, without a doubt. And so when they started going through all these things and they said Pikachu on the video, I stopped and I remembered, how do I remember Pikachu? They said Pikachu's tail, and I said Pikachu has a black stripe at the top of his tail. And sure enough, he doesn't. He's never had a black stripe. That one is really hard for me to say didn't happen. Mickey Mouse, here's another one. Mickey Mouse might be the most famous cartoon character in the world, I'm reading again, but even Disney's famous mouse is often misremembered in the minds of fans. People often report the character wearing suspenders when he does not. I remember him wearing suspenders. That is even really strong. As we're going farther back, it's getting harder and harder. Some of these, as we go farther back in time, I'm really seeing a split. But here's the biggest one. How many of you remember watching The Wonderful World of Disney on Sunday nights in the 60s and the 70s? Now, I was a little kid. In 1968, I turned 5 in the end, in September of 1968. And apparently it was called The Wonderful World of Color before that time. Now, I don't remember that, but I was like a toddler, so it's possible I wouldn't have remembered it. I remember it being called The Wonderful World of Disney. And I found this because people were saying that some people are remembering the beginning of The Wonderful World of Disney different. Now it gets even weirder because some people aren't remembering that part. They're remembering that the beginning of Disney movies are different. And it has to do with Tinkerbell. So I want to ask any of you who watched The Wonderful World of Disney from 1969 through the 70s. Before I say anything, what do you remember? What do you remember Tinkerbell doing in the opening? So just see if you can go back and remember. Now, I'm going to show you a clip from that show, the opening of that show from that time period. And this absolutely flipped my lid. And I am absolutely 100% certain that I am from a different timeline. Because there's no possible way I could have misremembered it that much. It's not possible. Because I remember when somebody said The Wonderful World of Disney, talking about the Mandela Effect, and they didn't get into detail. They said what Tinkerbell did in the opening of The Wonderful World of Disney. I stopped because I didn't want to be influenced. And I said, I totally remember the beginning of that. I closed my eyes and I replayed it. Because when I was, 7, 8, 9 years old, again, TV was such a huge thing. We didn't have VCR recorders. We had no way to play things back. If you weren't there when it was being broadcast through the airwaves into the antenna on the top of your television, you didn't get to watch television. You would miss it. And if you missed it, you didn't get to see it again until if you were lucky, they reran it maybe in 6 months or a year. So when I was 7, 8, 9 years old, and I remember watching the beginning of The Wonderful World of Disney, it had a huge emotional impact on me because, it was an escape from the craziness I lived in. But, and I would watch everything that was happening and the sound and the music. In fact, sometimes when I want to get nostalgic, I'll go back and watch the beginnings of, things like Bewitched and Beretta and, things I remember as a kid or going into high school. And yeah, I totally remember that Sanford and Son because it was a lot different than now. Now if I flip on something on whatever it is, it just doesn't have as big an impact on me, and I could completely, I'm doing a bunch of different things at once. And if I, what was that? I can go and rewind. Couldn't do that in the, 1970, for example. So I want you to see if you remember what happened. And I guess what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you exactly what I remember. And I know for a fact that this is what I saw. Because as I said, I wasn't influenced by what people were saying. Somebody just mentioned it. I closed my eyes and I remembered it fully. I played it back, and because I remember my little, 6, 7-year-old eyes watching, as Tinkerbell was doing what I remember. So let's see if you remember what I remember, because what I remember is not only can I not find it, people are saying it never happened. And I'm absolutely flipping my lid over it. So in the beginning of the wonderful world of Disney, what I remember is there was the Disney magical castle, right? And then the fireworks. I remember the fireworks and then the music, a violin or, whatever it was. The music starts playing. And that was a big deal. Fireworks on television and the magical castle. And I remember it, and the emotions were building me. And then I would wait. Of course it happened fast, but I would be anticipating the next part, which didn't happen in this timeline. What happened next is from the right top corner of the screen came Tinkerbell. And Tinkerbell came flying in, and she flew into the middle left of the screen. And she then, with her magic wand, as the announcer says, "The wonderful world of Disney," and those words come up, the wonderful world of, and then she, with her magic wand, cursively writes the word Disney. And then she makes the eye, the dot on the eye, and that explodes into the next scene. I absolutely remember that. It's not like I vaguely remember it. And again, remember what happened as I'm researching this. Somebody starts to say people are having a Mandela effect having to do with the opening of the wonderful world of Disney and Tinkerbell. And I stopped it because, again, I didn't want to be influenced. And I went back and I remembered exactly that. And so I then saw this. Let's see, where is it? I then saw this, which apparently is the opening of the wonderful world of Disney. And I saw all of the wonderful world of Disney openings. I researched all the ones that were ever produced in this timeline. And mine isn't in it. This is the one that supposedly came on my television in the early 1970s. And that is exactly the same. That is not. What you just saw there, that part would have been, and I remember that specifically, when there was a commercial break. When there was a commercial break, that part would come on. Would be the fireworks, and then she would go bing, 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 and then the thing in the center. But the opening, and it's really traumatizing me because I can still hear, as I'm sitting in front of the television, I can still hear the announcer say, "The wonderful world of Disney," as it says, "wonderful world of." And then she comes in and bing. I totally remember that. Now I'm starting to look back at all the other things. So there are some other things that I'm not the only one that's getting different. One is the Monopoly Man. I remember the Monopoly man having a monocle, but apparently he never did. I'm okay if I turn out to be wrong about that. Um, what else? I mean, there's a bunch of other ones that again I'm not that attached to, but this one I absolutely fucking remember. And I mean, if you were here or any one of my neighbors, you would have heard me like screaming at the top of my lungs, "Oh my fucking God! The timelines have changed!" They absolutely have. That is not something I would have missed. Not at all. It makes me wonder what else has changed. Here's the point. Your past never happened. It's just an idea in your head. For all you know, the way you remember your past and your childhood did not happen. For all you know, people that you knew never existed. For all you know, nothing is anything the way you remember it. So the point of that is not to go into denial. The point of that is you're carrying around beliefs you have about yourself. You're a good person, you're a bad person, you feel guilty about this, you feel bad about that, you're not good enough because you remember somebody, traumatizing you as a little kid, telling you you're no good, you're not good enough. It's possible that that is another timeline. You're not even in that timeline anymore. So since you're not in that timeline, you don't have to live out that future. You can live out a completely different future. Now, I'm not saying to ignore the memories and the feelings. Work through them and let them go. But do it with the knowledge that this may not have ever happened. In fact, it's not real anyway. It's in the past. It's by definition, every choice that you make, especially when you make a choice for your soul, you are shifting to a different timeline. Now, the changes in your timeline might be so monumentally small that you'll never know the difference. But some of them may be huge. Nelson Mandela dying in prison and there being news coverage and a speech by his widow, that is huge. And if you remember the, what is it called? I can't even remember the name of it. The something project. Anyway, the technology that the deep state has where they can look into the future and they know what events will change the timelines. Things like that make me think, what happened in the original timeline where Nelson Mandela died in prison? What happened in that timeline that the elites didn't want, that they went back and changed? And if you're born after that, you'll never know. It'll be exactly the way, the history of this timeline shows it to be. But little things like that, little things meaning like, Oscar Mayer or the Monopoly guy having a monocle or not having a monocle. Our history books might be of other timelines. In fact, it makes me want to go back and read modern history books to see, I don't know, was the Declaration of Independence in July 4th, 1776? It wouldn't surprise me if you told me it was something else. Anyway, it's just, this is no longer fantasy anymore. Now science and spirituality are coming together. And I've known, as I said yesterday in the video, from 5D, all potential timelines are just energy that you manifest with your choice. And it is absolutely a fact that I'm from a different timeline. Because the timeline that I grew up in, the wonderful world of Disney, did not play out this way in 1970. That was there, that wasn't. That was only in between, that was only for commercial breaks. The actual opening was, I'll never forget it. It's so weird. I'm remembering a timeline that no longer exists. But I'll never forget it. There's no way I'm wrong about this. The castle comes up. The announcer starts to say the wonderful world of Disney. As he's saying that, the music comes up and the fireworks go off. And then as he gets to the word Disney, Tinkerbell has already flown in from the left side, the right side of the screen to the left, and writes the word Disney, and then hits the eye with her magic wand, which makes the explosion, open up the screen to the opening. And I don't remember any of that stuff in the beginning of that. Every one that I've watched the beginning, I don't remember any of those things. That's not how I remember it. But I could be wrong about that part. But I'm definitely not wrong about how it opened. So I'm sorry, it's such a trivial thing, the opening of a Disney television show. But, I mean, it just flipped my mind. So, we'll talk about this some more. Anyway, thanks, guys. I love you all. Again, your past is a memory, and it could be a memory of a timeline that no longer exists. You don't have to hold on to any of that garbage. Create your reality now. All right. Talk to you guys later.